Hello fellow biogeeks. In this video I'm going to talk more about the next cell organelle, the mitochondria. So here I encircle them. So in my last videos I talked about membranes, the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus, and now I'm going to continue with the mitochondria. You might have already heard of them as the powerhouse of the cell. In this video I'm going to explain why that is. But first we're going to talk about the structure of the mitochondria. What you can see here is that it has like two membranes. It has an outer membrane and an inner membrane. The outer membrane is very smooth. It has no foldings like you can see on the inner membrane, and it has like small pores, just like the nuclear membrane, the plasma membrane. It has pores, and these can be used for ions to pass through to go to the space in between the two membranes, the intermembrane space. When compared to the outer membrane, the inner membrane has a lot of foldings, and it's also very impermeable to the ions and other substances that go to the intermembrane space. These substances can go through the inner membrane, and like I said, it has a lot of foldings, and these infoldings are called cristae, and these are useful for increasing the surface area. So in the inner membrane, there are a lot of proteins and other substances that are involved in, for example, ATP synthesis. And increasing the surface area makes it so that there's more capacity for these reactions, for these chemical reactions. And then lastly, enclosed by the inner membrane is the matrix. And not the matrix you hear about these days, but it's just the space in between this inner membrane. And this contains, for example, mitochondrial DNA, ribosomes, enzymes, and components that are necessary for the Krebs cycle, which you may have heard of, anti-fatty acid oxidation. And I said mitochondrial DNA. So what does this mean? This means that there's outside of the nucleus another entity that has its own DNA. So we have nuclear DNA, which is present inside of the nucleus, and we have mitochondrial DNA present inside of the matrix of the mitochondria. This mitochondrial DNA is transcribed into messenger RNA, and this messenger RNA is translated into proteins that are involved in the functions that the mitochondria has to exert. And it also contains ribosomes, and these ribosomes are used for the translation of this messenger RNA. So that's about it for the structure. Now we'll dive deeper into the functions. So here I drew my own mitochondria, which is not as good as the figure here, but it shows the outer membrane again and the inner membrane. The first function I want to talk about is ATP production, and this occurs inside of the inner membrane. So this is the inner membrane, and here there are like certain proteins that give off electrons to each other, and because of this it's called the electron transport chain. And what happens is that at a certain point there is like an increased amount of protons in the inner membrane, in the intermembrane space. And there's a protein called ATP synthase that will pass through these protons to the matrix. This will release energy. So the passing of the protons to the matrix will release energy. This energy is used to change ADP plus a phosphate to be changed into what's called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is a form of energy of the body, the cells, that is used, as energy for functions that the cell has to undergo. So that's one very important function, and that's why it's called the powerhouse of the cell, because it gives up the energy that the cell needs. Then, next up, in the side of this mitochondria, there's also the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is useful for when a compound is transported inside of the mitochondria, it will undergo the Krebs cycle. This compound, by the way, is called acetate, and this will go inside of the mitochondria and undergoes the Krebs cycle. So it will be converted into different types of compounds, and this conversion of this compound to others will release some form of NADH and FADH2. And this is then again used for the ATP synthesis. These are used in for the transport of electrons to the other proteins. These two compounds can be used for that. So again, the Krebs cycle is involved in ATP synthesis in some way. Then we have fatty acid oxidation, and this is basically the breakdown of fatty acids, and this will be in the form of acetate, and again, it will go to the Krebs cycle and have the same effect. The mitochondria is also important for calcium homeostasis. So it has calcium ions inside of the matrix, but when there are signaling pathways and calcium is needed, it will be transported out of the mitochondria. And lastly, there is also the involvement of apoptosis. So the mitochondria can release cytochrome C, and this will lead to the caspase activation, and caspase is a protein that initiates apoptosis so that the cell will die in a regulated manner. And this is important in some tissues as well. So that's what mitochondria are useful for as well. So BioGeeks, this was my explanation of the mitochondria. It's not fully in depth, but if you want to learn more about this or any other cellular processes, you can go to my description and go to my Fiverr account where I can give you private tutoring sessions if you have some things that you don't really understand. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found this interesting. Bye, BioGeeks.